Hi, it's Mo Bunnell, your business development expert, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm the author of the Snowball System, and I and my teams have trained over 15,000 experts all over the world on sound, efficient, and authentic business development techniques. I'm joined today by Michael Port. Michael and his wife Amy are authors of several best-selling books. Steal the Stage is a great one. And he's got a new book coming out, The Referable Speaker. I'm really excited about reading that. And they also run an organization called Heroic Public Speaking. It's a world-class organization that teaches experts how to present, how to sort of win the stage, if you will, and develop their business and achieve other goals that they want to do through speaking. And I've had several friends go through it, and they say it's absolutely phenomenal. And what I'm going to ask Michael in this episode is, what's his big idea for how we can grow our book of business, grow our relationships, and grow our career? And his answer was really good, and it was in the details, in the follow-up questions and the details as we had our discussion that I really found a lot of value. So this is a really great one. So before we get into it, know that if you want our best asset on how you can grow your book of business, your relationships, and your career, head over to growbigplaybook.com. That's growbigplaybook.com. And sign up there, and you'll get an instant download that'll give you the 8 things you need to have in your head when it comes to retention and growth. And it's a fast read. You can read it in about 8 minutes. So 8 beliefs in 8 minutes. Go head over to growbigplaybook.com to grab that. All right, let's get into it. Here is Michael Port. Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I am psyched to have Michael Port, best-selling author. He's, along with his wife, Amy, they run Heroic Public Speaking. They help tens of thousands of people get better at speaking and be able to share their vision with the world in a really compelling way. So, Michael, I'm excited to ask our first question of season 2 to you. I think I know generally where this is going to go, but it's in the details that I think the magic will be. So what's your best advice for how our professional services experts get great at growing their book of business, growing their relationship, and growing their career? Go for it.
I'd say stop speaking and start performing. Because most of the people who are trying to share their ideas, get other people to say yes to something that they're excited about, are usually sharing information. And when you share only information, it doesn't tend to change people's behavior. So what changes people's behavior? Well, first, we got to change how people feel. If we want to change how they think, which will then change what they do. So when we're working on presentations, we're working on pitches, we're working on sales conversations, I would say focus on 3 things. How they feel, how you want them to feel moment to moment in that experience, what you want them to think moment to moment in that experience, and then what you want them to do as a result. But don't skip the feeling part. That's usually what the mistake that people make, is skip the feeling. Do you want to soothe them at this particular part of the conversation or speech? Do you want to provoke them at this particular part of the conversation or the speech? What's the action that you're playing? What's the active verb that's going to change how they feel in terms of how you present, the way that you're influencing them, so you can change the way they think and then change what they do?
Michael, I love this. And you know our audience so well because you have the same audience. So we have so many really analytical thinkers. Think of the high-end management consultants around the world who we work with, the high-end lawyers, accountants, professionals, and folks like that. And what people can want to do is pack 4 hours of information into a 1-hour conversation, whether that's around the boardroom table or a speech at a major conference. And what I'd like you to, I've got my thoughts, but I'm holding back because I want you to answer. How do you advise them to pull back on all that information and then focus on the feeling part? I think this will be novel to a lot of our audience.
We call that too much plane and not enough runway. Right? Too much plane, not enough runway. It's not going to end well. So here's what I would suggest. We use a process called the foundational 5. This is what we call the foundational 5. And these 5 elements exist in any type of pitch or presentation. They exist in any type of pitch or presentation. Now, that doesn't mean that you deliver them in this particular order, but they will show up, and they're a really, really effective tool to use when you're first starting to consider how am I going to present these ideas to this person or these people. And the first foundational element is the big idea. Now, a big idea doesn't need to be different to make a difference. It just needs to be true, relevant, and important for the people you serve. And that big idea is going to support the entire through line of the presentation. Number two, can you articulate the way the world looks to the people in the room? Because often when you're asking people to change the way they think and the way they behave, it's provocative. You know, Mo, if I asked you to change the way you think about something you've been thinking about for the last 30 years, you know, that takes a lot to get your brain wrapped around changing. And so it's provocative. Even if you think, well, that actually makes sense, probably would be helpful, but wow, that's going to throw off my whole worldview and the way that I've organized myself. Let me find reasons to say no. And one of the reasons that people often use is, yeah, right, that makes sense, but you don't understand me. I'm different. Now, of course, usually when people say that, they're actually not that different, but it's an excuse that can be used. And if they don't think you understand them, that's a quick one for them to go to. So make sure you can demonstrate that you understand the way the world looks to them. That's the second element. The third element is being able to have a very, very clear, definitive promise that's associated with that presentation. Number four, be able to articulate, to demonstrate, to illustrate the consequences of not adopting the big idea and achieving the promise. What's the world going to look like if you do not adopt this big idea and go after this promise for yourself? And then finally, what are the rewards? What are the emotional, physical, emotional, and maybe even spiritual rewards of adopting this big idea and achieving this promise? And if you start with that framework first, it'll help you as you start to catalog your ideas and your content and start to put together the way that you would present that information. That's just the beginning. That's just one process to use to get into the ideation and content development stage.
I like that. And then does that provide the structure of the speech or of a talk or of a presentation around, right? That's just the beginning part, right? That gets their mindset. Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
That's right.
There's a number of different ways to structure a presentation, and the medium influences how you structure it, the format, the amount of time, the audience, the environment. There are so many different elements that go into how you structure it, and there are lots of different frameworks that you can use to structure a speech. But actually, that comes much later. One of the things that we've discovered over time is that most people, when they go into a presentation type situation, is they rely on their expertise. They say, I'm a subject matter expertise. I'm pretty smart. I got the gift of the gab, so I can just wing this. Maybe I'll put together some slides and I'll use those slides as my outline. Just help me remember where I'm going to go. But otherwise, I'll just wing it. It'll be fine. What could go wrong? What's the worst that could happen? Well, even if you do a fine job, it's likely that you finish that presentation and you might have thought, well, I didn't bomb. Could have been worse. Nobody threw anything at me, but I probably could have done that better. And if you're not using processes to do the content development work and then processes to do the rehearsal so that you're ready to perform, then you're probably just going to fall back on your preparation, which was nil. In the military, they say, you don't rise to the occasion. You always fall back on your training or your preparation. I think the same thing is true when you're performing, because people think they're going to rise to the occasion. Oh man, the Spirit's going to move me. I'm going to get fired up by that audience. I'm going to use their energy. And that really works maybe 1 out of 100 times. Usually you just fall back on your preparation. And if you're not prepared, you're not going to deliver it better than you've ever done it before. It just doesn't work that way. It's like trying to run a marathon and never having trained for a marathon. You're not going to rise to the occasion and just be able to run a marathon if you don't run.
Right. And presenting's like that. And I totally agree. And it makes me think of our big ideas that business development is a learnable skill. Well, being able to frame that to a high-end lawyer, let's say, that can be mind-blowing, because it's easy to think I could never do what Jane does. The problem with believing that it's a learnable skill now means I've got to do some work, and we help provide that as a solution.
That's right.
So let's play this. Let's play this out. Let's do a little example. Let's say that there's a lawyer. There's somebody, you've had a lot of lawyers and consultants and folks go through heroic public speaking. We've had a lot of lawyers go through our business development training. So we both know the world. Somebody that's super good at, it could be almost anything, intellectual property litigation, something like that.
Okay.
Well, that person that's really a great IP lawyer, a great IP litigator specifically, let's say that they're 95th percentile in their what they know and how good they are for a particular type of IP litigation. Well, somebody else is 70th percentile. The problem is 95th is a lot better than 70th. Like on the normal curve, that really is pushing you out of the margins. But the decision makers would have a real difficulty ascertaining the difference between 70th and 95th in a 1 hour finalist meeting. But in somebody's ability to communicate what they're going to do for that client, their ability to communicate their value is incredibly different if the 70th percentile is really good at the communication and the 95th at the actually doing the work isn't good at the communication, the lesser lawyer is probably going to get chosen. So I'd ask you this, given everybody that's gone through your programs and things like that, what's your best advice for somebody who wants to get better at the communication of their value part as opposed to the knowing their value part?
Yeah, I agree with you completely. It's interesting, what you said about how business development is a learnable skill. We believe the exact same thing to be true for public speaking and communication. One of the problems that exists in our society is that when somebody's really good at something, the language that we use often to talk about them is primarily focused on talent. So if you watch The Voice or you watch American Idol, they'll talk about, oh, she's talented, he's talented, man, the talent that they have. And so the rest of us sort of sit back and go, well, I could never do anything like that because I don't have that talent. But if you actually talk to those performers, they'll say, yeah, I've got maybe some talent, but I work on this 8 hours a day. And I've been doing this since I was 6 years old. And so I think talent is so overrated because I'll tell you what, look, we work with professionals at the highest end of the circuit, making 6 figures a speech. And we work with people who are entrepreneurs who don't care about charging for a speech, but they use speaking to advance their brand identity and promote their services. And the fact of the matter is, there isn't a big difference between the level of talent in the two groups.
I believe it.
The two things that differentiate those groups often are, number one, moxie, meaning the people at the highest end of the circuit, they feel like they should be there, that they have something to say, and when they go onto the stage, they take that stage fully. They own that stage. Now, some of them may legitimately be able to support that theory. Others, may be full of a little hot air, frankly. But the other thing that is the significant difference is the people that you're seeing at the highest end of the professional circuit, they work on their craft. When you see Brene Brown give a speech, you're seeing that speech the 100th time, the 1000th time. You're not seeing a speech she just wrote the day before. When you see Seth Godin give a speech, he's worked on that speech. He's not making it up as he goes. And so I think that I think that it's important for all of us that want to get better at something to move away from this idea of how much talent you do or don't have. Because we have thousands of people coming through our doors, and the ones who excel are the ones who put the most work into the craft of speaking, not the ones who are the most talented. If you have a lot of talented, you can get exponentially better faster. but it doesn't mean you're going to get ultimately better, because whoever puts in the most work is generally going to be the most effective in this particular discipline. And so anybody that has been in, a high performing career for a long time has seen this. They've seen talented people burn out, flame out, don't go anywhere because they don't either have the mindset for it or they don't do the work. And they see people that you didn't really think much of excel because they put in the work and they had the right mindset. And one of the reasons we created Heroic Public Speaking is because we didn't find another institution in this space that could or did teach the craft of speaking in a way that was substantial and comprehensive enough to actually give a person all of the tools that they need. Because it is a craft, just like learning how to do anything. If you want to learn how to, row, crew, it's going to take you a long time. You're going to flip that boat a lot when you first start out. But eventually, you're going to have these beautiful strokes. You don't even splash the water, and you're just going to, makes it look so easy. And people look at it and go, well, I could do that. That looks so easy. It's the same thing with speaking. When you see a great speaker on the stage, you go, well, that looks so easy. I could do that. Well, I think you can, but you got to put in the work.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I'm grinning from ear to ear because I just couldn't agree more. And what's sort of fun is about we're recording this video podcast about giving presentations and you talked about having the big idea as part of the foundational 5. Well, our big idea in this first episode is business development's a learnable skill. Speaking is a learnable skill. And man, we are 100% aligned. So this is going to wrap up our first episode, but folks, it's the perfect cliffhanger. It's the absolutely perfect cliffhanger for the end of the first episode, because in the next episode, you're going to want to watch this one or listen to it, because Michael and I are going to talk about, I'm going to ask Michael specifically, how can we use presentations? How can we use world-class speaking to create and to close more of the meaty work that we want? So Michael, we got to close with this. Everybody's going to want more Michael and more Amy. Where should they go?
heroicpublicspeaking.com. During this period of time, we're doing a number of live, free 2-day events, live streamed. So if you go to heroicpublicspeaking.com, you can look under programs and you'll see something called Stream. And that'll give you the ability for free to watch and participate in content development, rehearsal processes, and much more. So go check that out.
I love it. And folks, do that, because there's not only that, I love that idea of the free way to get a trial, to taste what you go to, because I've had so many friends go through your programs and love it. But folks, go to heroicpublicspeaking.com too, because there's free resources, there's how-to guides, there's downloadable assets. There's so many cool things at Michael and Amy's website you're going to want to check out, including the stream thing. So Michael, thanks for being a part of this episode. I can't wait to ask you the next question so our audience can learn from you. How can they create and close more opportunities? Thanks for being a part of the show.
My pleasure.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second episode where I get to interview Michael Port. He's he's channeling his wife, Amy, and all of her expertise too, because they both run Heroic Public Speaking. And if you didn't catch the last episode, it was fantastic. I asked for Michael's big idea on how we can get better at growing our book of business, how we can get better at deepening relationships, and how we can get better at enhancing our career because of the first two things. So in this episode, Michael, here's your big question. How can our audience create and close more opportunities?
I think that all sales offers should be proportionate to the amount of trust that we've earned. All sales offers should be proportionate to the amount of trust that we've earned. And the mistake that I often see, I've made it, I've experienced it as a consumer when other sales people have made it trying to sell me something, and I see it a lot in the marketplace, is people trying to sell too quickly. Trying to sell something for which they have not yet earned the privilege of selling. And so when I started as an entrepreneur, I wasn't really comfortable making big sales offers to people that I hadn't earned the right to make those offers to. So I said, I gotta be in, you gotta sell or you're not in business. A business that doesn't make money is not a business. It's just a hobby of some kind. So I thought, well, what do people usually respond well to without pushing back or feeling like you're, asking something that's too much? So, well, generally people like invitations, and then they get to decide whether or not they take that invitation. So I thought, well, what if I have something that I could always invite people to rather than selling? Because I was using speaking as a promotional tool when I started in entrepreneurship. I was giving speeches with the intention of building business out of it, but I didn't want to design a speech that was just a sales pitch. That didn't feel right to me. So I thought maybe I could offer at the end of the speech an invitation that has no barrier to entry. So instead of making a sales offer, I said, well, okay, every single week, and we're talking 2003. So this is prior to Zoom and video conferencing, but we did have something called teleconferencing. You may recall the days when we had just teleconferences. So what I would do is I would say, listen, every Monday at 12 o'clock Eastern, I do this free teleseminar, and I bring an idea that I think will help you think bigger about who you are and what you offer the world, and help you advance your professional goals. And I don't ask anything of you except to enjoy yourself. That's it. Simple as that. And if you love it, you can come every single Monday. And if you don't like it, you just hang up and I didn't even know you were there. Here's how you get access to it. And what I found is over the first 6 months of doing that, 85% of all of my clients at the time came through that always have something to invite people to offer. And what was interesting is that I made 0 sales offers on that weekly teleseminar, 0. But people who were getting value from it, of course, knew what I did and what I offered because they were in my ecosystem. So they would call me up or write to me and raise their hand and say, I'd like to talk to you about working with you in this capacity. Would you be open to that? And I'd say, okay, great, let's do it. And that's where the sales came from earlier on in my career. Now, our brand is such that our alumni refer new students to us, no compensation to them. We don't do that, but they refer because their value, they received such value that they want to pay that value forward, and they'll refer new people. But in the early days, I didn't have that I didn't have that ability to keep generating referrals through my clients because I didn't have as many clients. So the always have something to invite people to offer worked brilliantly at that time. And there's 50 different ways you could do it. I just did it with a teleseminar at that time because that was the best tool that I had access to. But rather than trying to sell every time you meet somebody, just think, what could I invite them to that would be valuable, relevant, important for them, that would add value to their lives or their work, and I can do it on a regular basis to demonstrate consistency without expecting anything in return. And you'll start to find that will create opportunities for business development for you.
Michael, I absolutely love it. We've got a whole chapter in our book, the Snowball System, on something we call a give to get or demand creation, things like that. And it's the idea of using your big brain, what's up in your head, to be able to invest in a prospect. Sort of the idea of treat your clients like prospects, your prospects like clients. So you're investing them in a way that they get to actually see what you can do. You actually you transition from talking about what you do to just doing it. And
That's
so
right.
they can actually see you with your sleeves rolled up, helping them on a problem. What I loved about what you said is it introduces scale and the default being on cadence. So what I think is interesting for our professional type crowd would be to dig into this a little bit more. So follow-up questions coming, which is some give to gets are best when it's just us and it's just the prospect and we're really talking about the new regulations that are coming or our new way of analyzing XYZ or whatever we do as professionals, and being able to give them one-to-one kind of guidance. That does make sense a lot of times. Other times it can make sense to have some scale to it, like your teleconference example. Webinars, value groups is where one of our techniques where we put like-minded clients together that meet, say, monthly or quarterly to talk about an ongoing type of issues. CHROs at retailers could talk about how to help their low-end workers with benefits programs or something like that, whatever it is. So what's your best advice around using speaking? Because I want to steer it back to your amazing expertise around speaking. What are things that people can do around speaking that could be sort of this invitation idea that you've seen out there?
Sure. So using speaking as a promotional tool is one of the most effective promotional tools because there are very few environments that can give you a platform that immediately infers credibility. If you're put on a stage in front of an audience, the audience's assumption is, I should listen to this person. I should at least give them my attention because clearly there was some decision-making process involved and they thought this person can offer a lot of value to me. There's something credible about this person. So it gives you a leg up. Now, of course, you've got to do the leg work to get those kind of gigs. But the mistake that I think people make is they think that they should be selling during the presentation. And ultimately what happens is the audience feels like they were sold, but nothing changed for them. And so if the audience feels like nothing changed, but they were told that if they did this other thing, something would change, buy this thing, something will change, it's not particularly compelling. So what we focus on is helping people deliver transformational speeches so that the audience does have a change. Something changes for them in terms of the way they feel, the way they think, and or the way they're willing to act. Because if they do have a transformation in that room, in that period of time when you were giving a speech, all they need to know is that they can work with you and they will ask to work with you. So it's a little bit like, I imagine you've read Purple Cow, Seth Godin's Purple Cow.
Yep.
So there's a book he wrote a number of years ago. And the premise in the book was, look, if you're driving down a road and you just see brown cow after brown cow after brown cow after brown cow, you don't pay attention until all of a sudden there's a purple cow. You can't take your eyes off it. There's a purple cow. You have to stop. You have to get out. You take pictures. And so the idea is that marketing is not going to be your lifesaver. It's not going to be the thing that sells a product that isn't good. And salespeople are not going to be able to save you by selling a product that isn't working. Ultimately, the product itself is the most important aspect of your work. If you produce something that is truly transformational, that where you've got an NPS score, right up to 100 as a regular basis, you don't need to do a lot of marketing and selling because the product is doing it for you. Okay. So when you're delivering a speech, are you delivering a speech that other people come up to afterwards and say, I need that speech on my stage. Can you give that to our organization? Those are called stage side leads. And if you're not getting stage side leads in that way, the speech is not yet working. That's your litmus test for whether or not the speech works. If you're regularly, every time you're giving that speech to a general audience, if you're getting 2 to 4 stage side leads every time you give that speech, then the speech is working. It probably could work better because a speech can always work better, but it means it's working well enough to produce more opportunities. Because if you get, say, 4 leads every time you do a speech to give more of those speeches, then you're going to book 2 of those, at least out of those 4. Well, now you just turned 1 speech into 2. Those next 2 you're going to turn into 4, those 4 into 8, 8 into 16, 16 into 32. That's the power of compounding gigs. And so I mentioned this, even if your goal is not to get 100 gigs, your goal is to book business out of the gigs. You need more of those gigs to book more of those clients. But if the speech is working well enough that you're actually getting people to ask you to deliver it again, this is what we call a referable speech. And this is the name of the book that Andrew Davis and I have coming out in June. The Referable Speaker is the name of the book. But if you're giving a referable speech, then you're going to pick up individual clients from it because it's that good. It's transformational. So yes, in the speech, mention, examples of a client that had a particular result. Sure. Mention, in the consulting side of my practice, mention, yes, but just lightly, just drop it like little flower petals just falling gently to the ground, but deliver something that people want. And if they want more of it, then they're also going to book you as a consultant. And then if you want to keep them in your ecosystem, always have something to invite people to offer so that there's no barrier to entry, so that they can stay, pay more attention, and get to know you over time, because trust is not built in an instant, it's built over time.
Well, Michael, I love it. And I think what I love about speaking as the lead for all these things is, unlike any other lead gen thing that we've seen, and I'm including live in-person speeches and webinars and potentially even being recorded and things like that, but it's you talking about what's important to your prospects and your clients. Anytime we're in that particular mode, if we've got that venue, then we not only have the ability to create that transformational change like you just mentioned, but we can do it at scale.
Yes.
And that's what I think is so interesting about speaking is, if you can get in front of that group of 20 C-level executives, of 100, of 1,000, the bigger that stage is, and the more aligned that audience is to the kind of folks that we want to work with, we can potentially get dozens of gigs out of one really well-crafted speech, because not only is our content good, you can read that in an article or book, but that audience is developing a relationship with us when we do it right. So sort of a speed round question for time, but can you talk about that relationship development and the fact that when we're on these stage, virtual or in person, that person's feeling, if we do it the right way, they're building trust with us, but we're doing it with hundreds of people potentially by doing one action. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, look, in the last episode, we talked about, first, we're going to make sure that we focus on changing the way people feel so we can change the way they think, and then change what they do. And what speaking allows you to do when it's live, and live can be certainly through video, or it can be in a room or a ballroom theater, is that you can affect how they feel. And that is the most important aspect to connection. Look, experts are a dime a dozen. Experts are just a commodity. I can go onto YouTube and I can learn almost anything I want about almost any topic from a variety of experts. I will remember few of them, but I will get the information that I want. But the person that influences how I feel is someone I will be connected to for a long, long time. And so you mentioned the intellectual property attorney earlier. The intellectual property attorney who is able to affect the people in the audience emotionally is the one that's going to get hired, because they're going to feel an affinity for that person. They're going to have a bond with that person. And so what we're doing with our clients who are attorneys, accountants, and others who are typically in a very information-rich business, who typically rely on their expertise and their information to impress people, we're trying to move them into a more feeling space where they're instead of trying to impress people with their feelings, they're working on making emotional connections by influencing how they feel. And that is usually going to win the day.
Well, Mike, I couldn't agree more. We've actually got the data on this, where we have an assessment that we've given the almost 20,000 folks that have gone through our programs now. And it actually can judge or assess, psychometric instrument wise, in validated way, how much somebody prefers to think in logic versus feelings, how much somebody prefers to think in big ideas versus practicality, the four major ways we think. And the overwhelming thinking style, as you would expect, I know we're picking on intellectual property attorneys. I was an actuary, so I'm right there with you, is that overwhelmingly logic-based. So the way that we can differentiate, the way that we can connect, no matter what our discipline, is our connection with them, and that's on the feeling side. So let's wrap up this episode because we got so much more that I want to get into. You crushed it on this one, Michael. We have delivered on our promise for how we can use speaking to create and close more opportunities. So great job. People are going to want more of Michael Port. Where should they go?
heroicpublicspeaking.com. So there's lots of free resources, downloads. There's even a download there for how to deliver virtual presentations during this particular period of time. That may be helpful. There's also a free 2-day event called HPS, or Heroic Public Speaking Stream, that you can get access to. You'll find that in the menu at the top of the page. And we do those every few months. So go there and check it out.
I love it, Michael. One last question. Tell us the name of your book that's coming out again, just so everybody's got it. They probably have their pens out at this point. What was the name again?
It's called The Referable Speaker.
Perfect. The Referable Speaker. All right, everybody, let's go grab that. Let's pre-order it right now. And if you like this episode, make sure you go back and listen to the last one, because Michael gave a big idea on how we can grow our book of business, our relationships, our career. And in the next one, I'm going to ask Michael, it's just perfect falling out of this episode. I'm going to ask Michael how we can use speaking to deepen relationships. So look for that coming next. Michael Port, welcome back to the third episode that we've been taping with you here on Real Relationships, Real Revenue. Everybody knows I'm Mo Bunnell. I want to jump right into it, my friend. I want you to give us your best advice on how people can use speaking to deepen relationships.
Okay. So in the first episode, I mentioned the foundational 5. And one of the elements in the foundational 5 was being able to demonstrate that you understand the way the world looks to the people in the room. And I want to highlight that now because it's critically important to start there and not to make assumptions that we already know what the world looks like to them and just mention a couple things and that should be it. But can you write 3 or 4 pages about many different aspects of the lives of the people you serve and what they're like? What's their home life like? What's their professional life like? What's their life like interacting with their partners at work and at home? What are their political perspectives? What's their perspective on the pandemic and how are they handling it? So there are so many different things that are important to the people that you serve that are outside of your sphere of influence, meaning the work that you do, but are still important to understand so that the people we're trying to develop deeper relationships with actually feel heard by us. So there's another thing to consider, and that's the difference between getting people to tell you you're right and that's right. So, for example, Mo, when would you usually tell somebody that they're right?
Oh, it's when you want them to quit talking, I think. Is that right?
Yes. If someone's going on and on and on, you're saying, yeah, you're right. It's just because you want it to end. That's it. Like, put me out of my misery, please. You're right. But the problem is that I see a lot of people when giving presentations driving to get the audience to tell them that they're right. Look, I'm right. Look, I know. Look. And sometimes that can turn an audience off. But if an audience member or the whole audience sits up on the edge of their seat and says, oh, that's right, after they hear an idea from you, now you have the same ideas. You're sharing those ideas. Now you're connecting with them. They're saying, that's my idea too. That's right. And that's going to make a much stronger connection between you and them intellectually. So if you're focused on the emotional connection by changing how they feel, also making sure that you can demonstrate that you understand the way the world looks to them, and you're also creating an intellectual connection where they will stand up and say, yes, that's right, you're firing on both cylinders then, both emotional and intellectual.
So let's play with this because I want to go deeper. So I'm thinking of a high-end management consultant that focus on really large-scale digital transformation at worldwide companies, Fortune 500. So let's say they're showing charts and graphs of why digital transformation is important, and that they can show the audience that they're looking at for whatever reason in their industry is lagging behind, and data and charts and all this kind of stuff. That feels like a "you're right" approach.
Yeah.
How would that same person move down a "that's right" approach? Give us the secret.
So it might take a little bit of work, but if it's worth doing, it's worth doing a little bit of work. It helps to find some sort of analogy that you can use to demonstrate that idea. So when you're presenting a new idea to somebody, the science tells us that people are much more likely to be able to consume it, understand it, and then be willing to adopt it if they can contextualize it. If they have something that they already understand that is just like it. So rather than just showing a whole bunch of charts and graphs about the data you have, can you find an example of something that they might already understand that is very similar? Could be, it could be a parental example. It doesn't have to be in the same space, but it needs to show the same outcome. And if you use some sort of analogy so that they can understand contextually what you're now teaching them, so they go, oh, it's just like this. Then they say, oh, that's right. That makes sense. That's something that I get and I agree with. So they're coming to you with an affirmation rather than you trying to prove it to them. And it can make a big difference.
I like that, Michael. Let's do one more question in this episode before we wrap things up. What I love about the analogy is I've seen a bunch of this research too, that like the most memorable things are stories. Right behind that is metaphors and analogies, and data and facts as well below that. I bet you see a lot of the same stuff. So let's say they connected with the audience. They've given this metaphor, this analogy that everybody's like, that's right. Yeah, this transformation is like what happened in the whatever in the business world or non-business. So you've got them there, like they're connecting with you. They've connected with you personally on an emotional level. What should the speech do next, right at that point when you've had that connection?
So generally, we want to ask questions of the audience so that they can come to the answer themselves, rather than telling them what the answer is. Now, you can do that more easily when you're speaking to people rather than, say, in an interview format. But you might ask them things like, how would you feel if? I don't know if this is for you, but would it make a difference if we were able to do X or you were able to do Y? And if you ask them questions so that they can give you the answers, and hopefully the answers are the answers you're looking for, then they're much more inclined to back the idea rather than being told what to think. Now, let me make one important caveat. That I'm not suggesting that you ask a bunch of questions just to get them to say yes, so that you then say, okay, so you want to sign up, and then you think they're automatically going to say yes. In fact, the opposite is true. When people feel like they have a loss of control because you're forcing them to answer in the affirmative, they will often say no to the big question that you ask. And there was a study done, and they used political fundraising to try to find the answer. And because they were fundraising for a long, long time by asking questions that got them yeses, so that when it came time to say, so are you willing to donate to the cause, they would say yes. So for example, do you feel Do you feel the country is in a worse place now than it was 4 years ago? Yes. Do you feel blah, blah, blah? Yes. Do you feel blah, blah, blah? Would you give us money to, advance this cause? And they would say, no. But then they tried the opposite, which was asking questions that got them a no. So do you feel that the country is in a better place now than it was 4 years ago? No. Do you feel yada, yada? No. Do you feel yada, yada? No. Do you feel yada, yada? Well, would you donate to help advance the cause so we can change this? Yeah, okay, I'll do it. Because they felt like they were in control because they got to say no, 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 no. Then when the important question came, they were willing to say yes. So if you ask questions of people and they feel like they're leading questions and that they're forcing them to answer in the affirmative, they start to hold back, their guard goes up. And then when you ask the important question, you might not get a yes. So in fact, give people control so that they say no, 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 until you get to the question where you really want the yes, and then ask that question.
I love it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
All right. So people are going to want more Michael Port and heroic public speaking. Where should they go?
heroicpublicspeaking.com. So there's a lot of resources for you there, downloads. There's even a 2-day event that we do for free online, a live streaming event. You can sign up for that. And we run them every number of months. So go to heroicpublicspeaking.com is a great place to start. You can also read Steal the Show. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller, and it will help you learn how to play the right role in any situation. It's a tour de force on public speaking for sure, but I also address how to use the craft of performance in other aspects of life in a way that's authentic to you and your style and your personality.
I love it, Michael. Thank you. Well, folks, this episode was packed with great information on how we can deepen relationships as we use speaking. The last couple episodes, if you didn't catch them, go back and listen to those because those are every bit as chock full of information as this one. And in the next one, get this, I'm going to ask Michael. I actually don't know where this is going to go. That's why I'm all excited about it. I'm going to ask Michael, how can we hack our habits to keep doing the things that are going to help us in the long term, even when we're really busy? So that's coming up next. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your friend and host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. And if you didn't catch the last 3 episodes with Michael Port, all about how we can use public speaking to build our book of business, deepen relationships, enhance our career, man, they were fantastic. And we're here in this 4th episode. And in this one, I'm going to ask Michael a question. And my favorite questions are the ones where I don't know where it's going to go. So Michael, here we go. Let's see where this is going to take us. How can our audience, people with one foot in the delivery of some complex service, people with the other foot in business development, retention, and growth kind of activities, how can they hack their own habits? What's your best advice on how they can keep focusing on the things that are going to provide value over the long term, even when the short term is biting at their heels and yanking them away from what's going to really pay off?
Well, this is a very provocative question for me personally, because I'm somebody that might appear to be very disciplined and hyper conscientious, but I don't actually think I am. I think I'm conscientious, but I don't actually see myself as hyper disciplined. I have to force myself to focus on the long term because I'm one of those people that loves really intense projects that take a certain period of time. I can work really, really hard and then it's done and I can move on to something else. And there's certainly benefits to being like that. I've definitely benefited from it. But if you are in the CEO seat of an organization, which I am at Heroic Public Speaking, that's not a particularly healthy way to run an organization where you do have a focus on long-term growth, because you burn people out in ways that are not productive. So one of the things that I've done, which has been really revolutionary for us at HPS, is we've gotten deep into using OKRs. OKRs, objectives and key results. And this was really very, very influential for us, and it changed our habits at work. It changed the way we worked. So OKRs were originally started at Intel by Andy Grove. And then John Doerr popularized them in his book, Measure What Matters. And of course, there's lots and lots of people who teach this, but we don't. We just use them. But what helped for us is because OKRs are all about setting objectives and key results for the future in still relatively short chunks of time. It gave me the best of both worlds, where I had longer term focus, but I could set these OKRs every quarter, work ambitiously to achieve those specific OKRs in the quarter, feel really good about the work we're doing in that short period of time, and then reset OKRs for the next quarter. So it allowed us to do long-term growth, long-term planning, but still leverage my natural way of being, and then sort of organize the organization around that without burning people out, so that they can, if they knew that if they were hitting their key results, then they're doing enough. They don't actually have to work harder than that or do more than that. Because one of the most important things that I've discovered after 50 years on this planet is that sometimes enough is enough. Like, more is not always better. I'm one of those people, like, there's just not enough cookies in the bag. I don't understand why they don't put more cookies in the bag. Or if one is good, two is better. It's just, I've always been like that. I'm a maximizer. And yeah, there is some benefit to that. But at the same time, I've really got to mitigate the risks associated with that way of being. And using OKRs has been really incredibly helpful for us. It's changed the way that we worked. So that means our habits around work have changed as a result.
Well, we've got to dig in, because one of the things that we both run similar businesses, which is fun, and about the same number of people who've gone through our programs. It's really cool how we have so much alignment here. We've both got one foot in helping deliver, what people purchase from us, with big teams of folks that help as well, and one foot into finding the next folks, using value, being attractive, magnetic, things like that. And one of the things I've found over the last couple of years, Michael, is that, like, thinking out over like 10 years lets you get really aspirational. We've got like a 10-year plan. We've got 3 themes typically for each year. We've got weekly sprints on what are the big 3, we call them MITs, most important things. What are your 3 MITs this week? Our whole team does it, things like that. But to your point, it feels like quarterly is where the magic happens. That's where you can get just aspirational enough, almost like at the project level, as opposed to the task level or the dreamy level. Like at the project level, what are you going to do this quarter? And picking 3 projects that each person's going to focus on. So question back to you is, hey, just let us peek inside your brain, the organization. Like, what are specific examples of your OKRs on a quarterly level? What are outcomes that have happened from those? What do you focus on when you do it? Just give us more.
Sure. So if I may, you can tell me no if you would like, but rather than giving specific examples of OKRs, what I'd like to do is actually focus on projects versus processes, because we are process obsessed. And we have found that being process obsessed has been the thing that has driven our growth more than anything else. The smaller your organization, I mean, I have worked in large organizations, but it's been 30 years since I've done that. So my time, for the most part, as an adult, has been spent in smaller organizations that I've run. And when I say small, I mean, less than $20 million in revenue is small. And what I've found is that the only way we've been able to keep our service at the highest level we possibly can is if we know how we do it every single time and we do not deviate from it. The only way that we can keep people from burning out is making sure that everything is process oriented, so they're not making things up every time they got to do something new. And the value in the business, the money in the business, is in the processes, and then by as a result, the systems that you develop for the business itself. And so OKRs are just another aspect, another process that we use to advance the goals that we have. One of the things that was really helpful that I did a number of years ago was create something that I called the HPSOS, the Heroic Public Speaking Operating System. And it's a 50-page document that I suppose could be a book, but it details every single aspect of exactly what we do, why we do it, how we do it, who does it, and where we do it. And it starts with a contextual model, because we build contextual models in our training and we teach people how to build contextual models. So is a contextual model, I use it for training every new person that comes into the organization. Anytime a question comes up, we go back to the HPSOS. And the way that I developed it is by, picking and choosing different aspects of operating systems that I've found over the years work for us and creating our own. So it's proprietary to us. It could work for lots of other businesses, but I think that every single organization needs to create their own operating system. Just like every type of computer has an operating system that drives the work of that unit. And so without that operating system, I think we'd just be a bunch of people running around doing work. But here instead, we can be creative artists who can focus on growth and development, working inside these processes so that we can make sure that we're always doing things to the best of our ability because we know how to do them through these processes.
Yeah, I really like that. In the application I can see here in really big organizations is like we train a lot of client executives and account managers at big healthcare companies, at big outsourcers. Well, that client executive basically runs a P&L. They run a business that's about the size of what you're thinking about. Maybe it's a managing director and senior partner at a big three consulting firm that we work with. Well, they basically have a pyramid of people that serves 8 or 10 clients, and they've got an operating system they could run. So what I love about what you said is I think it's more universally true than just looking at an entire entity. We should have an operating system for the 2,000 partners at the big consulting firm I'm thinking of.
Yep.
But only a few people control that, right?
Right.
Just like the board or the executive team. But the little piece that we own as a senior partner, we could create an operating system for that team.
That's right.
Because maybe we focus on the consumer industry in a very specific region of the world, in Europe or whatever.
That's right.
And somebody could come up with their operating system for the clients they serve, for their book of business, for their team, for their practice area or whatever.
Yep.
And they could implement your idea there. So
That's right.
let's have a speed round question. So if somebody's going to develop their operating system for the chunk of the business that they control, what's the number one thing they need to get right? Or maybe a better question, if you want to go with this instead, is what's the number one thing they should do to just get started on it?
Yeah. So first of all, it's important to have a really clear picture of where we're going to go. The operating system has to be designed to go somewhere. Otherwise, it's just circular, and you might sustain the business, but you may not grow. Now, if the growth is just if the goal is sustaining and not growing, then that's fine. But make sure the operating system is designed for that. So what is the point of the operating system? Number one. Number two, I would encourage you to develop that operating system with everybody that you work with. So it's not something that you from the top say, here's the operating system, let's go. Nobody is going to be interested in that operating system. So everybody here works on the operating system. Everybody creates their own standard operating procedures for every single thing they do in their role. And so it feels much more collaborative as a result. And then, number three, you don't have to use OKRs, but it is helpful to have some sort of system for setting and measuring key results. If you don't have some way of measuring key results, the operating system may look pretty, but it's probably not going to be incredibly applicable. And so what we do is we have two different sets. We have objectives and key results, and then health metrics. And this is an important differentiation because objectives and key results are aspirational. Here's what we hope to achieve in order to grow the business or grow this or improve this aspect of the business. It's not always growing as in making more money, but it might be reducing, increasing retention, or it might be improving certain processes or systems, or increasing our net promoter score, et cetera. But then, and this is critically important, then having a separate set of health metrics for every person in every department. Because to me, the health metrics are the things that if you didn't do any of your OKRs, like if you didn't meet any of your OKRs, the business would stay healthy. So what do you need to do in every single area of the business, finance, sales, marketing, etc., to stay healthy? What metrics do you need to see on your website? That means we're healthy. What metrics do you need to see in the finance department? That means we're healthy. And those are getting tracked every single week, every single month, every single quarter, because that tells you we're healthy. If we didn't grow, we're going to stay this way. The objectives and key results, that's going to get you focused on growth. So you only want a handful of those, just a couple. The mistake that most people make is they start with, here's our 965 objectives for the quarter. So good luck with that. But you might have 20 health metrics in the finance department or 30 in the marketing department, but you might only have one objective and 3 key results for the marketing department for that quarter, depending on the size of the department, of course.
Yeah. Michael, I just love it. That was the perfect ending to these episodes because it just pulls it all together to really figure out how do we grab control? How do we grab the reins for the chunk of the organization that we control? So thank you for that. So folks, in the next episode, I'm going to recap the top 3 things that I learned from Michael over these episodes. I can't wait to do that. I'll do that on my own. I'm going to apply everything specifically to business development in your world. So be ready for that. So to finish up this one, Michael, where should people go to get more around heroic public speaking?
heroicpublicspeaking.com. So a lot of free resources there. There's a downloadable guide on how to deliver virtual presentations. And there's also an invitation to a free 2-day live stream event coming up in April. And then we do those every few months. So if you missed that one, you can come check out a future one. But go to heroicpublicspeaking.com and you can see all of that.
Awesome, Michael. And I can't encourage people to go out there enough. There's a ton of resources. Michael and Amy's email list is fantastic, gives you little tips and tricks all the time. Sign up for that while you're over at heroicpublicspeaking.com and grab some of those resources because they're really good. Michael, hey, thanks for being on the show. This has been awesome. I had high expectations. You beat them as I expected. So thanks a ton. And I can't wait for our audience to just devour more of your content.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks. Hi, this is Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm author of the Snowball System, and I and my teams have trained over 15,000 high-end experts all over the world on sound, efficient, and authentic business development techniques. I absolutely love what I do. And in the last several episodes, I've been interviewing Michael Port. Michael and his wife, Amy, are the owners, and they run an organization called Heroic Public Speaking. And they teach people how to be great speakers and to accomplish whatever they want personally and professionally through speaking. Really, really great at what they do. I've had several friends and colleagues go through their training courses and just get phenomenal results from it. So it was a thrill to have Michael Port on the show. And man, did we cover a lot of ground on specifically how to use speaking to grow your book of business, to create and close the meaty business that you want, to deepen relationships and foster broadening your relationships to win the relationship advantage. And then the episode right before this one, how can we hack our own habits to win the long game all the time and stay focused on doing the big things that aren't urgent but are important so that we can have long-term success. In this episode, I'm going to cover the big 3 things that I learned from Michael. And I'm bringing in actually a lot of insights that I've just gotten over my career in using speaking and helping other people use speaking. And it's tremendous because I hadn't quite thought of these things in this really long arcing way in the way I did it until I interviewed Michael. So it really made me go back and think back into the 1980s when I started thinking about speaking, even in high school. And in this episode, I'm going to tell some stories and I'm going to give you some insights specifically leveraging a lot of what Michael talked about, leveraging a lot of things we've learned, that a lot of things are in the Snowball System, so that you can use speaking to really accomplish all that you want personally and especially professionally. Speaking is an incredibly powerful tool. I absolutely love using it, and I've seen so many of our clients achieve things more than they ever thought they could through speaking, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in this episode. So before we get there, you have to know that if you want an instant download on 8 key beliefs that you can read the whole thing in about 8 minutes, head over to growbigplaybook.com, and the 8 beliefs you're going to learn are how to think about business development and how to achieve success, sort of a business development operating system, if you will, that you can put in your head. And that signs you up to get little emails from us, short ones. They typically takes 3 or 4 minutes to read these. Really powerful. That'll give you a tip every single week that you can use to enhance your business development skills and feel great about it. So that's at growbigplaybook.com. Head over to growbigplaybook.com to get the instant download and then set up for that future success, where we're going to drop insights into your inbox every Saturday morning. So with that said, at growbigplaybook.com, let's get into my summary and with a decent amount of add-ons from what I learned from Michael. So thing one, and I'm going to give 3 insights here. Thing one is I want to really strongly recommend that you think about using speaking to grow your business. Here's a couple reasons why. A lot of people think you got to be like super extroverted or whatever to do speaking. It's just not true. Folks just need to practice it. I've seen introverts crush it at speaking. I've seen extroverts crush it at speaking. The idea is that we just want to have the right formula, get on the right stage, and deliver the right message. And if you do that over and over again, like any skill that you've got in life, you get really good at it. It takes some practice. I know folks who don't like it, but most of those people haven't been taught a system on how to do it well and haven't done that several times so that they can get really great at it. After you speak several times, sometimes smaller audiences, moving up to bigger audiences, you just get comfortable with it. Like any other skill in life, it becomes normal. Think of the first time you got in a car and you drove. I almost hit my dad's restaurant or my family's restaurant in Preble, Indiana. Got into this burgundy Suburban. I mean, it was like a Sherman tank. This is like 1980 something, 82, I don't know, when I was 15, 82 maybe. And we get into it, and my dad gave me a little bit of prep, and we're getting ready to drive in an empty parking lot in a town of about 80 people at a restaurant we owned. And it was, there's 30 feet on either to my left and right. There's absolutely no chance something's going to go wrong, right? It's the safest environment of all time. And I get into it, and I forget what happened. I think I was going a little bit, and I wanted to push the brake, and I accidentally pressed the gas. And in complete panic, I turned the wheel at the same time, and I'm going straight for this cinder block restaurant building, this farm town of 80 people. It's almost impossible to hit something. And I finally got my wits about me. I can still remember it in slow motion. I'm 53 years old. I still remember this moment so many years ago. And I finally shifted my foot to the brake, screeched the massive Suburban to a halt, didn't hit the building, and I just stood there with my white hands on the steering wheel. And I look at my dad, and I'll never forget this. He says, "Well, I think that's enough for today." There was no getting back on the horse after that. I think he feared for his life. I don't remember what happened after that. I think I blacked out. But anyway, that was my first driving experience. My point with that was I was petrified. I didn't do it well. I almost ran into something when it was impossible to run into something, or nearly impossible. And now these days, think about driving. Well, I just get in the car, and it's actually a very complex series of events that you do to start a car. You grab the keys, you put them in the ignition if you've got that kind. If you don't, you set them on the dash. If it's more electronic, you grab the seat belt with one hand, you put it in another, you put it over here, you snap it in, you grab the car, you turn the car on, you hit the brake, you hit reverse, you look in the mirror, you look at the camera. Scientists call it a behavioral chain. When after you drive a car 1,000 times, you think of it as, and you starting the car, you think of it as one fluid motion because the behavioral chains have all linked together. But when you're first starting out, you actually have to think about, where's the seat belt? What do I do? What did I do with the keys? Now, do I put my foot on the brake? Or, oh yeah, on the brake, then I can start the car. I press the button, I turn the ignition, whatever. Well, the point with that story is that anything in the beginning seems difficult, but after you do it a few times, you get better, and you get better, and you get better. And speaking's no different. So my point with all that long story is that you can learn speaking even if you don't think you can. One more big element to this first piece of content, first thing I want to tell you today, is thing one part of that, call it 1A, is the idea that anybody can learn speaking. I 100% believe that. 1B, if you will, is that it reaps big rewards. I can't think of any other technique, and we've got 15 of them, 15 methods to generate leads, to meet new people, to expand your book of business, to expand your relationship ecosystem. There's a ton of them in the Snowball System. There's 15 in there. There's 15 in our Grow Big training. Well, of the 15, I've seen speaking as the most important element, one, to really get flow-through rates and have a high efficiency of your time. And two, we use components of what we learn in speaking in so many other things. It has secondary benefits that are really, really a big deal. Here's what I mean by that. The first part of that was speaking has a lot of leverage. And the reason that's true is most other techniques don't get you in front of a lot of people, where if you do it right, they are bonding with you as you speak, and you might be able, let's say there's 100 people in the audience, virtual or in person, you're bonding, you're communicating with 100 people at once through one action. There's very few things in life that have scale like that. For smaller stages, if you can bond with 10 people, 10 decision makers through one talk, one speech, virtual, in person, whatever, that is a 10x return on your time than if you're just talking with one person. And if you have 100 people, you're now at 100x, 1,000, 1,000x. Speaking gives you scale. You can do it in person, at conferences, with partners. You can do it with clients where you're bonding with them while you're bonding with the audience. When you're adding value through speaking in a live and in-person event, it's incredibly powerful. But the digital age is upon us. Now we can use our same speaking skills over a platform like Zoom, WebEx, whatever, and we can touch a lot more people through a webinar, through a speech at one of our clients, through an association partnership, whatever, and you can impact far more people than you can do in an in-person event typically because of the scale of the internet. That's really big. Then speaking flows into other things. If you really get good at speaking in front of 10 people, 100, 1,000 or whatever, those same skills are applicable in so many other ways, like you get used to telling your opening story. Well, then that can also help in a finalist meeting. You get used to having an inspirational close. Well, that can help you in a 2-person meeting with the client that you're talking about a project you're about to start. That secondary benefit of speaking is powerful because there's not many things in life where if you learn this thing, it helps you in these other 20 ways. That is my summary with speaking. It's one of those things that gives you tremendous leverage on your time, and the skills that you learn happen to be applicable in so many other areas that getting great at this one thing actually helps you get great at 10 or 20 different things. So I want you to think about using speaking as much or maybe even more than you are now. That is the big idea one I wanted to share with you. The second big idea I want to share with you is treat it like a craft. I talked before about how business development can be learned, how speaking can be learned. Michael and I went back and forth on that. He believes it, I believe it. When you add it all up, we've both together trained almost 40,000 people. This is a really, really big deal when we've seen it happen over and over again. Any complex skill is both learned and earned. And if you treat speaking is a craft, which just means you need to break it down. You need to practice all the incremental parts. If you really want to get great fast, you hire people to help you get great at it. Michael obviously does that. And if you've got somebody that's guiding you through a journey, whether it's a mentor you work with, whether it's hiring an external partner or whatever, you can get great really, really fast. The major components of a speech are, these are the things you need to get great at, are telling your opening story, so you're bonding with the group. Another coach I heard said something like, if you tell that opening story right, if you get the first 3, 4, 5 minutes right, people will follow you anywhere. And I've put that into practice, and I've found it to be true. If people bond with you in the beginning, they'll follow you anywhere. It really leverages the science of primacy effect. That beginning set the tone for something much larger. So if somebody bonds with you right in the beginning, they're gonna stick with you forever. And how you do that is you want to tell a story that shares with them that you've been in their shoes. It shares with them that you've solved some big problem that they're struggling with. And you're somehow communicating that you do this out of heart, out of passion, out of love. And if they feel that, then they are going to want to hire you and work with you and follow you around whatever you do. So that's sort of piece one of a really, really, really great a speech is you're somehow bonding in the beginning. The second piece is there's just a ton of content you want to cover. I personally like 3 things. I really like having 3 pieces of content. When I make an error, I try to put too much content in, and that's the error I see almost everybody make. And sometimes I try not to do this, but you can get so excited about you've got this wealth of knowledge and you really want to share it with others that you can just cover too much. And that's the battle we all fight. I fight it too. And it's trying to come up with just the right amount of content so you still have time for your opening and you can actually communicate a lot of value. The ending to a speech is really important as well. I like to end with a little bit of inspiration. I like to end with something that's going to linger. The science behind that's called the recency effect. And it's the idea that while primacy tells us beginning set the tone, recency tells us whatever we cover at the very end is the thing that lingers. That's what people remember. That was the last part. It's the hug after the dinner at your house. You just really want that ending as you escort somebody to the door, maybe even walk them to the car. That last 5 minutes of the night is one of the most critical elements of the night. The big hug at the end, man, we had fun. It was so funny when so-and-so shared this. So glad you came over. It's the recap and the little inspiration in the caring at the end is what everybody remembers. So I think if we had a third piece of a speech we want to get really great at, it's being able to drop in inspirational stories that are going to linger with people and help them feel inspired to do more than they ever thought that they could. So if we just think beginning, middle, and end, some kind of opening story that shares the components I mentioned before, but at a high level, let somebody bond with you. Some kind of content that's super meaningful, like literally sharing, as given the time you've got, everything you can. Roll up your sleeves, help them solve a problem, help them with as much transformation as possible given the time that you've got. And then reserving some type of a inspirational close at the end that relates to what the content was, but helps people feel like they can go and do more on their own. If you do those 3 things and just get really great at those 3 things, then you will have success speaking. And it's usually the first and the last that most high-end professionals don't get right. It's because they're so focused on the content and they're so excited. This is for me too. I get so excited about sharing and helping people in the content portion that I can sort of mess up sometimes the beginning and the end. I've studied this a lot. I feel pretty good about what I'm doing, but when I make a mistake, let me tell you, it's because I try to do too much content and it squeezes the beginning out or doesn't leave me enough time in the end to really give that inspirational close. So that's the second big idea that I wanted to communicate to you as I really thought long and hard about what I learned from Michael. The third piece is really practical. And I'm actually going to start doing this. Michael didn't cover this in our back and forth, but it's something I've been thinking about. I'm going to create a database of the three things. I want to create a database of my opening story. Most of those are mostly the same, so there's not a ton of deviation around that because I've really honed my craft. I've now given my opening story hundreds of times to the point where I can do it, and there's a version I can do in 30 seconds. In a cab ride, there's a version I can do over 5 minutes. I can flex in between, but that's usually about the same. So that part doesn't change too much. It more changes based on the time I've got, but it's sort of the same story. It's just how much of it I can share. The middle content piece can change a lot. We've got some signature talks that we give, killer talks that we give at partner retreats, at big annual sales meetings and things like that. And there's several that we can give. Sometimes we customize them based on all the content that we've got in the Snowball system. So we can take one exact piece of content and go really deep on that, like say demand creation. We've got a talk that we can give on that. We've got a talk we can give on lead generation. How do you meet new people? We've got a talk on how to do business development in a virtual world when the pandemic hit. We've got a talk on how you can deepen relationships. We've got a talk on how to focus on yourself and get the right business development habits. These are all talks that we can give. And there's always, or typically there's three pieces of content in each one. Those are awesome. But I can develop a little database on what are those. If there's 3 elements in all those, I want to get better at being able to swap those around, Lego bricks, if you will, Post-it notes in my mind. How can I swap those in and out? And I think I just need to create a little database of what are all those 1/3 of the content piece. And then I can more easily find where it is in PowerPoint, if we've even got slides, or what is the story, what's the technique, what are the science, what are the steps around each of those. And I'm going to just create that over the next couple weeks in some way that I can keep track of it really easily. The last piece, the inspirational close. This is something that I've always made up on the fly, and I've got 1 million of them, but I've never written them down. Okay, that's a problem. I need to remember these various stories that I choose as an inspiration and just have a list of them so I can plug in the right ending and not forget about it. Because if it's in your head, you just can't remember it all, right? So if I can get, say, my small, medium, and large version of my opening, if I can document all the different middle thirds of the content piece, so I can swap those in and out as I wish. Those are mostly documented in different places, but not totally. And then the inspirational stories at the end, honestly, I might have used hundreds and thousands of presentations over time, never written them down. And as Michael was talking to me, I'm like, that's a mistake, because I'm sure I've forgotten the great one I used 8 years ago, and I'm never going to remember it again because I didn't write it down there. So I've got to get those so when I'm giving a great talk, I can do a quick scan and go, oh yeah, the such and such story. That's a great inspirational close for this one. And now I'm going to get even faster, more efficient, and give better talks because I've basically got blueprints or an outline or the components documented. And I can't wait to do that. That's going to take my game to the next level. So those are your three big pieces that I wanted to share with you. Speaking is incredibly powerful. I think after I talked with Michael, even more powerful than I remembered. Speaking's a craft. We can always take our craft to the next level. And then that last piece, I really want to, for me, the next level is documenting the various components of a talk so that I can grab them easier and remember what they are and develop talks even better and even faster than I am right now. Well, I hope you enjoyed all that. I really enjoyed talking with Michael. I can't tell you how many people have said over the years, you need to meet Michael and Amy Port. You guys do similar things. You're going to love each other. And this is the first time I met Michael through this, and I absolutely did love the way his big brain thinks. And I really love the work they're doing at Heroic Public Speaking. I've heard so many great things. So I hope you will go check out their website at heroicpublicspeaking.com. There's a ton of great resources out there. And like we said before, on our website, head over to growbigplaybook.com to get our various things that you can grab a hold of. It takes a couple minutes to sign up, and you're going to get a ton of value from that. Hope you enjoyed this. Grab a hold of public speaking. Let us know if we can help you in any way. And I hope that speaking helps you help your clients succeed.